Hey, it's Bill Ferreter, and it's time for another 10-minute team tip. I'm going to tell you something. The phrase that I like the least in education is, that kid just doesn't care. I hear that an awful lot from teachers when we're frustrated with our kids in our classrooms, right? We think that when a student isn't engaged in the learning that we're doing, that for some reason it's a kind of a moral flaw on the part of kids, and that they really just don't care about anything we're doing. Now, I just want to challenge that a little bit in this video. The first thing that I want to point out is when we say that a student doesn't care, oftentimes we're referring to students who aren't showing the behaviors that we think represent a good student. What are those academic behaviors? Well, things like going to class or doing their homework or being organized or participating in class or studying. Right? So when kids don't demonstrate those behaviors that we think define a good student, we just jump to the conclusion that they don't care. But what research shows is really interesting. It's true that if students were to demonstrate those behaviors, you'd get higher levels of academic performance. We should want our students to demonstrate proper academic behaviors. But what research shows is those academic behaviors are actually a function of a student's academic perseverance. So when kids have grit or tenacity, when they have self-control or self-discipline, is when you'll start to see them show up to class on time and do their work and participate in class. See what's going on there, right? The behaviors are a function of their ability to be perseverant, to demonstrate the skills of a perseverant learner. So then our question becomes, how do you develop an academically perseverant learner? Well, the research is as explicit and as clear as day. Students become perseverant learners when there are 4 mindsets in place. And it's our job as practitioners to ensure that those mindsets exist within every learner in our school. What are those mindsets? Well, if a student is going to be perseverant, they have to believe that they belong in your academic community, that they have a place there. And I'm not sure that all students feel like they belong. Every student needs to believe that their ability grows with the effort they put in. So if I'm going to invest in learning, I want to know that there's going to be a payoff in the end. If I see that, I'm more willing to be perseverant. A student's academic perseverance grows when they're convinced that they can be successful and they have evidence to prove it. And last but not least, a kid's willingness to be perseverant improves when they believe that the work they're doing has value to them and not just out of compliance, right? Like, I'm going to do this because otherwise I'll end up in detention, but this work has value to me in my life. I'm going to use this knowledge to do something I want to do. So what does that mean for us as educators? Well, we want to develop the dispositions or mindsets of learners. Why? Well, because if you do, right, you end up with more perseverant kids. And when you have more perseverant students, they will show the proper academic behaviors. And then those proper academic behaviors will lead to increased performance. I think we get this wrong in schools all the time. We think that if a student doesn't show proper academic behaviors, then the strategy we should pursue is some kind of consequence or punishment. Didn't do your homework? Well, you're going to get a 0, or you need to stay inside at lunchtime today. We try to punish a student into demonstrating the behaviors that we want as a learner. That'll never work. Because to achieve the behaviors of a learner, you have to be perseverant. And to develop that perseverance, you need to believe you belong, believe that your efforts will pay off, believe you can be successful, and believe that the work has some kind of value for you. Now, for us as teachers, the good news is that we can teach these things. We can develop strategies to help a student see that they belong in our space, or see the connection between ability and effort, or see the connection between being successful, or to realize that the work has value. If we wanted to, we could develop instructional strategies to develop those beliefs in our learners. Let me give you an example. Let's go back to that idea of that kid just doesn't care. I think oftentimes when we see a student who presents like they don't care, And I don't doubt that those kids exist, right? The student who comes in and puts their head down on your desk, the student who does 3 problems and stops, the student who doesn't do any of their homework or never raises their hand. I don't doubt that they're presenting like they don't care, but I think what we're really seeing sometimes is kids who have no evidence that they belong in our space. And that's such an interesting thing for us to reflect on. Are there some students who know that they belong and that they're accepted by school, and other students who've never seen evidence that school is a place that believes in them? I actually want you to take a pause for a second. Would you pause the video and process with your table mates? Do you believe that the students who struggle in your building feel like they belong? And more importantly, what are the specific actions that you took to build a sense of belonging in your students? What did you intentionally do to try to ensure that all kids, including those that struggle, feel like they belong in your space? Okay, take that pause, process for a minute, and then start the video again. All right, well, it was a bit of a trick question. Here's why. I shouldn't really be asking teachers whether or not students feel like they belong. We really ought to ask kids. And that's been done, y'all. Here's a survey from 2024, right? When they surveyed 612 students and they asked the kids, are you a valued member of your school community? Only 39% of the kids agreed with that statement. Think about that. 4 out of 10 students believe they're valued in school and were surprised when they're disengaged. The next statistic was even more surprising to me because I thought that perhaps the level of belonging went down over time. So middle and high school kids obviously would report higher levels of not feeling like they belong. But when you dig into the research in that same exact survey, even in elementary school grades 3 through 5, only 45% of our students, less than 1 out of every 2, said they felt like they were important in their classroom. Doesn't that suggest that we as schools need to do a better job building belonging? Right? If when I'm convinced that I belong is when I'll be persistent and self-disciplined, then why aren't we worried when fewer than 1 out of every 2 kids are telling us that they feel like they belong in our space, or that they think they're important, or that they believe that they're valued? Those numbers really ought to challenge us. And I might suggest that a strategy you could implement would be, have you surveyed your kids? Have you asked your students whether or not they feel like they belong in your school? Have you done a focus group? Maybe the counselor can sit with students who struggle and ask them whether or not they feel like they belong. I actually think those are questions we should be asking. But if we assume that that evidence is true and that it would play out in your school too, the more important question is, so what the heck are we going to do about it? How do you build a sense of belonging in learners? Well, I'll give you 2 specific strategies. This is my friend, Tim Brown, and he was the principal at an elementary school called Campbell Elementary. And like many schools, they had a slogan one year. Their slogan was, we're going to build a brighter future 1 brick at a time. I thought that was a neat slogan, and it's pretty typical, right? Most schools will have some kind of catchphrase. You slap it on your school t-shirt, and we wear it all year long. Now, what Tim's school did that was different is they wanted to communicate to students how they could help to build that brighter future. So they articulated 3 actions that students could take in order to make a contribution to the brighter future of their school. Those 3 actions are on your screen. It was, if you gave your best effort, you were contributing to building that brighter future. If you supported your peers when they struggled, you were contributing to building that brighter future. And last but not least, if you tried again when you struggled, you were contributing to building the brighter future. Do you see what's going on here? They wanted to give students a chance to make a contribution, because when you make a contribution to a shared space, that's a form of belonging. Now, what was neat is that Tim had weekly challenge assemblies. Once a week, he brought all of the students from the school together into the gym. And teachers could award students with a brick certificate during those ceremonies. So if a student had tried their best, if they had tried again after struggling, if a student had supported a peer, they might be called forward in front of the entire student body by their teacher, and they would be given a brick certificate to commemorate the moment where they'd made a contribution to the school. Now, those brick certificates were hung in the hallway on the wall outside the gym. That all by itself is a powerful communicator of belonging because a student can see that wall of bricks building those contributions that were made by members of the community, and they can point out the places where they made contributions too. And if they stopped there, that would have been pretty impressive. But Tim took it a step further. Tim awarded a yellow hard hat to a student the first time that they had received a brick certificate. He bought them on Amazon. They weren't fancy in any way, shape, or form, but if you earned a brick certificate, you got a yellow hard hat, and you got to wear those yellow hard hats to the future morning assemblies or weekly challenge assemblies. I want you to just remember how powerful that visual is, right? Because now yellow hard hats begin to spread across the gym. What does that say? Look, we're a part of something together, a larger community. But more importantly, you earned that hard hat because you had made a contribution to the community too. So if you had a yellow hard hat on, which by the end of the year usually was every student, you belong here. Not only do you belong here, but you made a contribution to our space, and we see you, and we recognize you, and we appreciate that contribution. That's a powerful way to communicate belonging. That visible token of the hard hat proves to students that they belong. And it shows students that other people, students they may have doubted or didn't believe in or didn't get along with, those kids are making contributions too. That's how you build belonging. You need another example. This is El Dorado. This is in El Dorado, Arkansas. It's Washington Middle School. And they created what they called cowbell standards. What was a cowbell standard? It was the most important standard in every unit. And they taught students that we want you to care about that cowbell standard just as much as that dude cares about his cowbell. We want you into it. And more importantly, we want 100% of students in every class to master the cowbell standard. And they kept track by class period of the percentage of students who had mastered the cowbell standard. And when a class period had gotten to 100%, the principal, the instructional facilitator, guidance counselors came rolling in with cowbells and a boombox and had what they called a cowbell celebration. It was just simple raging mayhem to celebrate the fact that a class had gotten to 100% mastery. When that happened, individual students within the class received a cowbell sticker that went on the outside of their computer to commemorate their achievement. Now, why does that matter? Because when you see the outside of a student's computer and that student has cowbell stickers all over it, they've made a contribution to the academic community. I'm your equal because I mastered the same standard that you did. That's powerful, particularly for kids who struggle and who aren't perceived as academically as other students. Like, you don't belong here because you can't do the same things academically that we can. This is the great equalizer because everyone in the class has to master the standard before the sticker's even awarded. It also encouraged students to support each other. So if a class was at 97% mastery, you would see teachers say, hey, if you're still struggling, go find a classmate, a friend, who's mastered the standard because maybe they can help you figure out how to master it too. So it built this sense of responsibility for one another in students. That's how you build belonging. Do you see what's the same there? What's the same is that visible token that I'm a member of this community too. Whether it was a yellow hard hat or a sticker, it was a visible reminder to everyone that I belong here, I make contributions too, I'm an equal, and I have value. I'm not sure that all students see that all the time. So there's a question that I really want you to wrestle with, right? And by the way, if you'd like to know about cowbells, more about cowbells, you can scan the QR code on your screen. It'll bring you to an article that I wrote with the principal of Washington Elementary School, right? We talked specifically about why we did this and how it worked. So go ahead and read that article if you want to know more. The biggest thing I want you to recognize or to see is that if we want students to fully invest in our learning, they have to believe that they belong first. And so for teachers, if we can create opportunities to show students the contributions that they're making, that's when we're building that sense of belonging. And we can do that through things like a morning assembly where students are recognized for contributions, or we can do that through a celebration of an academic achievement of an entire class. As long as there's a visible token involved, you're building that sense of community and you're showing students where they fit within that community. Now, I want to point something out. This is an academic intervention, y'all. You know, when we talk about interventions in school, so often we think we need to reteach our academic standard. And that's not untrue. We should reteach academic standards. But I also want you to realize that no matter how hard you work to reteach an academic standard, if a student doesn't believe like they belong, they're not going to invest in your instruction anyways. So I want us to stop thinking of interventions as only things that are tied to academic standards. What steps are we taking to build the mindsets of a learner? Because if we did that, we'd see students who are more perseverant to begin with. And if they're more perseverant, they're going to come prepared. They're going to try, they'll participate, they'll study. And if they do that, you'll see higher levels of academic performance. Does that make sense to you? What do you think of the notion of calling an attempt to build belonging a mindset of a learner? What do you think of calling that an intervention? Is that worth spending time on in our schools? I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, but it's more important that you talk to each other about those thoughts. Are you investing in belonging in the same way that you're investing in teaching your standards? Sometimes I think we forget that we're not teaching standards, we're teaching students. And one part of building a student is developing the mindsets of a learner. Hey, I'm done. I know this video went on for a while, but if you can't tell, I'm pretty passionate about this stuff. I think we're spending a ton of time studying our standards, and that's great. But I think sometimes we forget that it's more than just figuring out how to teach a standard. Our real goal is to figure out how to better teach students. And one part of that process is making sure they feel like they belong in our space. Have fun with that thinking, and if you have questions, reach out. I'd be happy to help.